All right, it is Wednesday, September 8th. We are back in the saddle. The big guy is back in action. We got football season. Everybody's back in the swing of things. Say goodbye to summer. You got the NFL. Riggo's just snorting and ripping and tearing. Can't wait to just break down some film on the burgundy and gold. Here's Riggo.
Hey, without further ado, whoa, what a build-up, Todd. Gee, I don't remember the last time we did this. Well, actually, Todd, I'm kind of back off the DNP did not play list, I guess, or the disabled list.
Or the PUP, the PUP list, physically unable to perform.
Yeah, that would have been on, I believe I tested positive for the COVID virus here a couple weeks ago. And finally, yesterday, got my rapid report and said I'm negative, and then I just got it this morning, and I'm the PRC or PCR or whatever that test is.
The old...
I am negative, exactly. The old 6 inches of...
the brain scrape.
6 inches of a cotton tip up your nose, down your throat. No, Vinny from with a garden hose.
Up your nose with a rubber mistacata. Vinny Barbarino.
There you go. Anyway, so I'm back from the Walking Dead. Somehow I got knocked off while I was in Montauk. We went up to see little dude who spent the summer in Montauk, who had the endless summer, I might add, but she's back in school now, and finally, it knocked me down for a couple of weeks. It wasn't real bad. It didn't have, anything like I had to go in the hospital or anything.
And you were fully vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated, yeah. And the weirdest of all things, about 2 days before I actually started coming down with serious symptoms, we put on a big lobster feed in Montauk at the house where we were staying. I cooked 14 lobsters. I was the chef, right?
Whoa.
So we had at least a dozen people there, maybe one or two more, I don't know, but right around that. Do you realize out of all those folks, I was the only one that came down with anything? And I was the chef that night and served everybody and did all that stuff. It's pretty incredible. Nobody, there was another family there. My oldest daughter's boyfriend's family was there. There was about 5 folks there, 5 or 6, and then some friends of ours, Henry Uline and his wife and child. Henry owns a marina that Coco worked at. Excuse me. Well, I'm not
now
completely.
That's authentic.
I'm not 100%.
Using those
and then, of course,
skills.
Then my own
there.
personal family. But anyway, the point is you had all these different folks. Everybody went back. They got tested. Everybody was negative except me. And so anyway, it's taken me a little bit to kind of crawl back out from underneath this, but I'm feeling much better. And I have to say this: when this stuff first hit, 18 months ago, whenever it was.
Yeah.
I was kind of like one of those folks, like in the back. You see, at that time, tragically, so many people were dying. But you just couldn't. I'm going, but then again, when you get stuff that happens once every 100 years, like a flood, 100-year flood, then every once in a while you get the 1,000-year flood, that's bad stuff. And so if you think about it, 1918, right, that was the Spanish flu or whatever it was that swept through.
That pandemic.
That's where it got the name or whatever, but who knows exactly how that got. But anyway, it killed hundreds of thousands of people. I believe that's correct.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you don't... So my point is, as a kid, I've had chicken pox, I've had mumps, I've had measles, I've had all this stuff now that there's vaccinations for children. And smallpox, not that I didn't have smallpox, but back then you got a smallpox vaccination. I think I still got the scar on my arm. But you don't realize that, you kind of go, how bad can that stuff be? That's what I was thinking at the time, 18 months ago. I'm thinking, they're making a lot out of this. I don't know. Maybe if you really got certain problems or whatever, like
comorbidities.
Exactly.
Underlying issues.
Yeah, exactly. Obesity, COPD, right. Those kind of,
Any pulmonary, upper respiratory.
Exactly, and then that would include, coronary heart disease and all that stuff. But I'm also thinking, you think of yourself, it depends on how you see yourself. I see myself as a very healthy individual, always have, and very physical and capable of doing things. And that's my mind's picture of me. And then that's an accurate photo, Todd, but that photo's 50 years old. One little minor detail I left out of this was, I'm 50, I'm 70, I just turned 72.
And this was right after your 72nd birthday.
Yes, exactly. It was right on the heels of my 72nd birthday, so I kind of left that part out. But anyway, getting back to what I was trying to tell you is, so I kind of gave it, a short shrift, like, well, yeah, how bad can this stuff be? Well, let me tell you something. This stuff can be bad. And I didn't even have it bad. I mean, Dave Butts, poor Dave, I think he had a respirator, was in the hospital for, I want to say, at least 2 weeks and maybe 3. Dexter was in the hospital
Our boy
for
Dexter.
3 weeks.
Dexter was in the hospital for 3 weeks.
Right, and he was borderline about ready for a respirator. And I can't imagine when you get to that point.
Yeah,
I mean, my oxygen levels were always good, and that was a saving grace. But I also have a little bit of what they call these, the autoimmune disease stuff. I had this PMR a few years back, which, and I think that may have been part of the reason that it hit me as hard as it did. It didn't get into my lungs, but I had a pretty big inflammatory reaction to it. So I had, congestion and all this stuff. But I'm feeling much better. I'm on my way back. And like you said, there's all of a sudden, it's so funny. I was just driving over here today, and I looked up, and I've been driving down Clara Barton Parkway. I looked up some of the trees, and all of a sudden I noticed, boy, some of those leaves are getting a little yellow tinge to them. It's such a strange... I suppose that depending on the individual, but for however I'm wrapped, there's always something a little depressing about the fall for me. And I think it goes back to when you were a kid, and basically you lived for the summer.
Right.
And because, basically when you got old enough, you didn't have to have a babysitter at home. We could go down and play a little baseball, maybe down at the Diamond there, and then in the afternoon get with my buddies, and we go down to the creek and fish for bullheads and sunfish and all this crap. And you did, and then all of a sudden it was over, and it was almost like your autonomy just dried up, and that's when my dad took over.
You're back into basic training.
And we had just gone to Minnesota to visit my mom's parents in August, or always around my birthday, beginning of August. And we're just coming back from that, and but you're not really all happy because it's like this is all coming to an end. I can only imagine what Coco went through. I think she's actually still going through it because she had the endless summer. She worked at the...
we got to get an update on her in the summer tour.
But she's now, she's a junior in high school, and she is swamped with activities and schoolwork and all that. So whenever we find her, if we get her down moment, we'll have to dial her in and see what she thought of her summer. But it started off with a trip to Alaska, and then it culminated with, about 10 weeks of working in Montauk, New York at a marina, which don't get any better than that if you ask me.
My goodness, yes.
So we've got a lot of stuff going on. And as you said, the football season's getting ready to start.
Well, how many? Well, that has to be. I mean, for how many years? Because summers used to seem like went forever.
That's
right?
the other
As
part.
we were teenagers, that 3 months seemed like it was 6 months. And then
for what?
When we had the summers off as kids, right? It seemed, and that was the coolest 3 months.
Oh, right.
And then when it ended, boy,
it came with a bang.
With
Came with a crack. Well, that's the whole point. That it's a double whammy, really, in a lot of ways. Because for me, here you grow up. You start off when you're in grade school, lower school, first grade. We didn't have kindergarten back in Centralia. They just didn't have enough teachers. I don't know, but anyway, you start first grade. And every year was the same thing. Like you said, you had the summer to yourself, so you did all these fun things, as much fun as you could have. I mean, I always imagined had I, grew up in Salmon, Idaho or something like that, you'd never seen me. I'd still be in the mountains, I'm guessing. But I was out
Jeremiah Johnson
I
over
was
there?
I was in barbed wire strapped in Kansas, so I wasn't going too far. But, we made the most of it and still seemed to have, like I said, a lot of fun. So you'd come back and, school would be starting, and that was like, oh, man, this is just like a crimp in my style big time. And then as the years went by, then you got into sports, which always football would start in the fall. And then, that went on through, basketball and track, and then baseball would start in the summer. So you had all this stuff. And eventually it turned into, that's the way I started making my living, was playing football, right? So, that you started out, and this time of year, which is, we'd have to back it up a little bit because we're in September now. Actually, the regular season would have started 50 years ago by now. I think the first weekend. But anyway, you had that, and that was the other part where you realized you were going to have to go back. Two-a-days is just something like, I think, nowadays, I don't think these guys even think twice about it. But back in those days, I'm telling you, two-a-days was literally like, you had just been pulled in off the street for whatever crime you committed, and you were going to give the man 30 days. And it was just like Cool Hand Luke, pretty much, except, there wasn't any shotguns that kept you inside. But for the most part, you got to bed at 11 o'clock at night. You got up at 7 o'clock in the morning. You were out on the field at like 9:30 or whatever. Then you went back. You ate lunch. You went to your meeting and you watched film. And then it was back out on the practice field. Then you did get to slip away for a few beers right before dinner.
But you did have to slip away.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm telling you, it was another one that you just go, oh God, got to go to Carlisle. This ain't gonna be.
What was the joint up there? The gingerbread.
But I never went there. That was a real popular hangout for a lot of the tourists that would visit Carlisle. Guys like Ron Saul and myself and Tom Owen, another backup quarterback. We'd always go find some bar. I mean, Ron and I found a place called the Whistle Stop, which was this little gin mill that, God, it was just tiny. It wasn't a whole lot bigger than the studio we're in. And it was right down by the railroad tracks. And we was only, and Carlisle had a rubber company there where they made tires. So they had, and plus then the railroads that ran through there, they had all kinds of shift work going on there.
Okay.
So there would be people that would get off in the mornings and go to the Whistle Stop, and have a shot and a beer, and then they'd go home and do whatever, and then go to work the following afternoon or whatever. So we kind of fell in with that crowd. But yeah, it was all pretty depressing when I think about it. But now, it's depressing for a completely different reason.
Well, okay, so let's think about this and do the math here. So you're effectively 52, 54 years where come September, you're preparing.
Lockdown.
You were, that mentally.
Yeah.
The seasons and the time of year.
That's the other thing. Do you realize it? And I think we talked about this just for a second here a while back. 50 years ago, I was a rookie in the NFL.
Right.
50 years ago, 1971. I have some of those thoughts too. It was, where you think about going to, where you go to. I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. I remember this part when, I was drafted. I was a 6th pick overall, and drafted by the Jets. And I didn't, I just never could wrap my brain around the fact that I maybe had was good enough. I just figured, boy, somebody made a terrible mistake here. And it's going to be embarrassing for me, but it'll probably cost them their job. Because
What's my dad going to think?
Yeah, well, it was one of those deals where I ain't going to be here all that long. And it kind of, in a way, I'm sure it played out because when I got there, I didn't know any better. I was a dumbass. And I remember and I'd been at the college all-star game for 2 weeks at least, maybe 3 almost, back when they played that in Chicago. So I drove into camp late. And here you are. But I didn't hold out to my credit. Back then, every once in a while, you'd get some rookie that thought he was.
You decide to do it later, holding out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, listen. Once I became the smartest guy in the room, I was like, hey, this is pretty obvious. But I wasn't the smartest guy in the room.
I don't want to enter the league coming in super smart.
Exactly. Well, I wasn't because I didn't even think I'd be there that long. I figured. We'll see how this goes, but I'm pretty much a phony. I'm bogus, okay? I knew that. You don't know that yet, but I'm going to show you here before it's over with. But yeah, and I'd go. They'd give me the ball, and I'd run to the line of scrimmage and maybe get maybe to the linebackers and just turn around and go back to the huddle. And I remember Weeb Eubank, who was the coach. He pulled me aside after practice one night. He said, "Hey, John, listen. I don't know what you're used to, but here we like to see the ball carrier run down the field 20, 30 yards after you get
out of here.
Okay, I can do that.
This is how it works.
Huh?
This is how it works.
I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I had no clue. I'm going, well, I thought that was far enough. Yeah. That was close enough for me. And actually, I should have said, Weeb, once again, I wasn't the smartest guy in the room yet, but I said, Weeb, what difference does it make? We're a passing team. We throw the football. We don't run the football. Come on, get serious. But I didn't know that at that point in time. So, yeah, 50 years ago. Hard to believe.
Wow.
Think of all the stuff, all the things of coming from a little town in Kansas. And, Lawrence, Kansas isn't really much bigger. Well, it is quite a bit bigger than Centralia, Kansas. But still, in comparison, Lawrence, Kansas and Centralia, Kansas are much closer to being the same size town than Lawrence, Kansas and New York City.
Little different.
The cultural shock of New York City.
Little different.
Which I still haven't gotten over, in this stuff. Even like here in D.C., all these, all the stuff, all the infrastructure around you is always still something that's really an eye-opener.
Yeah, no question. Well, here we are 50 years later.
Yep.
The changes in the game, the status of this game in the culture is mind-blowing. and you were going to see this with the start of this season.
Let me stop you just for a second, Todd, because I've thought about this on the way over here, and I've been thinking about it for this off season for the most part. And I realize now that I think guys that have played like myself, who were rookies 50 years ago, and then some of us who are even older yet, and then some that are a little bit younger, but have played in that, I don't know if you want to call it the golden age of football, because that sport back then, and basically, I don't know, I'm not an historian, but you could make the argument that that's really the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Those 3 decades in there is where football slowly but surely overcame a lot of sports.
It overtook baseball as America's pastime.
Exactly.
It is the going without. Just a quick, but the notion of you guys are the first generation of TV on a mass scale across the country that the entire country could see a John Riggins in Washington or, whomever out there. This is the generation that made the game what it is today.
And also, and this is where I'm going with this, is that you have to remember, it was a completely different game then. Completely different game. Now, this is what makes, for me, I guess most people don't want to know that aspect of it, and I don't even know if it's worth bringing up, but truly, you have to look at football and understand it's show business. And so when you look at all the records that they talk about, and this record and that record, and then you get into the stuff which just like, it's mind-numbing, particularly when you start talking about Super Bowl records. But you have to understand, the game that is played today, and this is the whole thing I was talking about, is so completely different and foreign from the game that was played 50 years ago.
Oh.
And a lot of people ask, well, do you think you could play today because these athletes are so gifted? And my answer to that is obviously, well, Bob Hayes was Bob Hayes, world's fastest human. That's 60-some years ago, and I think Bob could still probably run
DNA
with
hasn't changed, evolved that much.
Exactly. It takes a little bit longer than 50 years. So my point is, but the big question is, and the answer is yes, they could, but it's something they're not used to, and if you threw them into it, they would just be outraged. If the players today had to play by the rules of 50 years ago, they might not like this game as much as they like it today. First of all, they wouldn't be getting paid in other words, the circumstances are so different. And I'm not talking about, like these guys played for the love of the game. That, some of them maybe did. I didn't. Obviously, we know that. I played for the love of money. And I think that's completely legitimate. But at the same time, I feel like, as I look at this game today, it's like I don't know, I can't consider myself an expert. I mean, I've played this game. I played it for 14 years. I was around it for, 14, 15. But at the same time, to play today like I said, it's a completely different kind of game. I mean, even, somebody as great as Joe Jacoby, a Hall of Fame tackle in my mind and everybody's mind, and except the people that vote this in, I've talked to him, and the way the players set up and they're blocking, it's so much more like basketball now. It's a game of screening people, really. Finesse, yeah. Occasionally, you'll see a guy with a bull rush, that'll happen. But for the most part, everything's, and it's a passing game, so it's not unlike hockey. Is a rule basically that in hockey, if you notice, the puck travels. Everybody travels in the same direction as the puck, so everybody's moving parallel for the most part. The business model of football is just the opposite of that. You move in opposite directions at one another at high speed. And I think that part of the game is being phased out. So when I watch a game today, I'm thinking, oh man, that guy was awful. But that's not what they're being taught.
Right.
And so I think I'm a little bit overcritical when, in fact, a classic example is Trent Williams, the offensive tackle that was here, gifted athlete, unbelievable. Great feet, huge guy, strong guy. But I've never seen him, nor was he ever asked to, but I never ever actually see him knock somebody on their back. Drive blocking, he didn't drive block. He didn't do that because he wasn't taught that. He was such a great athlete, he'd just jump in front of you and screen you off. You couldn't get to the play. That's what I've seen, and I've asked Joe about it, and he basically corroborated everything that I thought, what I was seeing, that is kind of the way it is. But that's where I say, when you get some of these guys that are older players and they're talking about the game today, myself being one of them, I'm going, well, take it with a grain of salt, because what I played and what they play now are two different things, and who knows what they're asking them to do. I'm assuming that they're doing what they're asking them to do, so this is the way the game is actually being coached.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think your hockey, your NHL analogy is right on point. Just as hockey cleaned up, the fighting, the excessive fighting, the super defensive play, that they wanted it wide open and scoring more and less of the brutality of the game, as the NFL is working, because they also are seeing the effects of your generation and your peers and guys that came before you, the physical detriment of this game under the rules you guys played under.
But why is that? It's not because of their hoping guys don't have to suffer more pain.
No, it's because of liability.
Bingo. Gets back to why I played.
We
money.
don't care about you.
It's all about money.
It's not football. It's not family. I don't want to hear any more of those ads, because it ain't. And when the machine is done grinding you up and using you up, you're going to be cast aside, and there's a long line of folks be right there to take those places.
Because there's a long line of folks waiting to get into the stadium to watch them grind up the next batch of players.
Well, less event stadium is more that are watching on TV and at the money making, at the betting parlors, and at your fantasy footballs.
That's the part that's, to me, is just kind of where you don't, at this point in time, now that gambling is being added into the mix of the popularity of something, and it makes you almost got to give it a moment of pause. Not that I'm that, I'm not a great thinker. I'm not trying to go down that road at all. But you kind of look at, where's mankind headed with this whole idea that all the gambling, the proliferation of gambling, and the opportunity to go to the game and, maybe I'll just go back to the window and, put something down on the game, make it interesting. You know this whole world, Todd. You like to get to the window every once. You used to anyway.
You are going to be bombarded, inundated. If you thought fantasy football and all the commercials that they had a couple of years ago that you could not escape in every commercial pod. So the league has capped how many, but the league just announced like 4 or 5 major partners 3 weeks ago. Combined with every team locally and their ability, combined, it's what's going to be on your newscast and your.
This is the gambling aspect?
Yeah, the gambling aspect, and I tell you, this is going to be a study in society here of unfortunately all the negative consequences that come with this after a year or two, because the accessibility on your phone, on the ability to do this, there's going to be a lot of broken marriages, relationships, and otherwise.
I mean, exactly. But here's what's really interesting, is how far out does it get to where they actually start scripting the games like WWE?
Oh, my.
Because when you think about it,
collusion.
Well, because when they show stuff in Hollywood, right, that there's they film the endings of all this stuff, and so there are some people that know exactly how
they film
Jeopardy's going to end.
multiple endings for the major movies, right? And they test market a lot of movies that you've been in. Do they want the happy ending, the sad ending, the ambiguous ending?
And see which one they think is going to make the most money off
of.
Well, that's my point, is when it's all said and done, because you are a fool and you gamble because you think and it's all based on chance anyway. And then maybe there are some people who actually do know. I don't want to take anything away from a true professional gambler. But let's just say it's rigged, right? I mean, in the big picture, somebody's going to win.
So what are you saying?
Somebody's going to lose.
Saying?
I'm just saying.
Replay booth. They're sending it to New York.
Right.
Okay. All right.
That's going to be a fumble. That is definitely a fumble.
And
but his knee's not down. No, it's a fumble.
Years.
Huh?
They've been doing that for years. That is the dirty little secret. And now with the replay booths and all, they've actually expanded those powers now. So suppose about the purity, and we all want to believe in the sanctity and the purity, but let's face it. This is as big a business as it gets.
That's what's so crazy about it.
And the billions that are riding literally every Sunday.
Yeah.
When the state of New Jersey, John, I quoted you these stats about a month ago. Since the state of New Jersey enacted sports gambling, I don't even think it's been a full year. It might be coming up on a year anniversary of that. One state, they've been averaging over $700 million a month in gambling, in bets. Okay,
so we're talking about $7 to $10 billion a year on one state.
Yes,
What is that?
and that's not.
And you got the gambling houses are taking 10% off.
And that's not even during an NFL season, which is the most gambled sport of all of them by a lot.
I would think so.
So that's one state, and it's here. You know, I'm anxious to see how it all goes down. I personally like it. I think there's, let's face it, it's no different than the marijuana laws. There's a lot of the sin taxes and stuff that has been legislated and
that's a great
condemned
point.
illegal.
People are going to do it.
Right, they're doing it anyways.
That's what's interesting about the game of football. The game of football has hit what would be a nerve? It's hit something in the human psyche that I think. I mean, not everybody, but certainly a huge, huge part of our population in this country is so in tune and wants, for whatever reason it may be nothing more than to feel good about your home team or whatever, your college team. I mean, let's not forget about college football, too, because that's a whole other can of worms, if you will, in itself, which just started this past weekend, and all the fans that you have there that people clamor. It does not matter. I mean, we've actually gotten to the point where I think people would go, oh, gee, I'm really sorry to hear that he broke his neck in 4 places. But who's his
replacement?
Backup?
Yeah.
Who's his backup?
John, it's scary what it's become.
I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that's the facts here, folks.
Yeah, and you being a legend, a Hall of Famer, it's scary what it's become in the culture, in my opinion. It priorities, and it's tribal, and we all want to belong to something. In those halcyon days that you guys gave us in the 80s and that 10-year stretch, that's never going to be duplicated ever again. And we were fortunate to have it once in our lifetime, and what those moments and matters meant to all of us. But man, how this is perceived, and the ratings are going to be off the charts. The gambling is going to be off the charts. What we are about to be bombarded upon after Tom Brady and what he did starting tomorrow night defending against the Dallas Cowboys. They're going to set more records on ratings and revenue like never before, especially coming off of not completely out of COVID that we want to delve into a little bit here.
But still, there's going to be a lot of people in the stands.
No question. Right? It's not like it was in lockdown last year.
Yeah, my thing is that, with the people, the fans, I really don't think they care. We joked about this last week a little bit when I got to feeling a little better about the fact that the NFL, they act like they really police everything, and we really are on. It's all kind of really. Nobody really cares. The public doesn't really care. I mean, you could have public enemy number 1 on your football team, and if this guy can, make 25 tackles and 4 sacks in any given game, public's going to go, well, that's football.
Well,
that's football.
Yeah, this other he was misunderstood.
This isn't this U.S. senator we're talking about.
He wasn't proven guilty in a court of law.
That's my point. Is people want it and they don't care. And I'm not saying they should one way or the other. I mean, I want to get into the morality of all this stuff, but to me, it's kind of a joke, if you will. It's kind of like, okay, the NFL goes out and they pour a little water on this little patch that's burning over here and stamp it out, and then we got another one over here, but really nothing really changes, right? I mean, we saw that this past summer when they almost crippled the Washington football team with that $10 million fine. I mean, good God.
I mean, that was like 0.001%. I mean, I think Dan has
almost 90% of the owners carry around $10 million in their foreskin. Almost all of them. I don't know about the local guy here, but I mean, most of them. Oh, you need $10 million? Here, turn your back. Turn your back. Okay, here you go. You might want to put that in a plastic bag.
Well, as we say this, John, it's the big business of sports in this country, and it is no different than entertainment, right? A movie star, a rock band, a rapper, it's all entertainment, and therefore nobody truly cares as long as we're being entertained.
And that's where it, there used to be a real distinction there. When I say used to be, you go back 40 or 50, 60 years or whatever, and I think that, back and then, this goes back to Charles Barkley, and his famous statement, I'm no role model. And I've always agreed with Charles Barkley when it comes to that. That how can they? Because you have the same thing in Hollywood. You've got the actors. The guy that he's on junk or he's doing
Right.
heroin and all this stuff, and everybody goes, oh, he's an actor. But an athlete,
Right.
That's a different
You're
story.
different.
Your story. But now that I think it's starting to all kind of blend together.
Completely.
Because it is entertainment that people want to have. That they need that entertainment. And then when you think about it, it's how is it any different in Hollywood when it comes to it's all fantasy to begin with.
Right.
It's all fantasy.
All about the Benjamins.
Yes,
but
it is.
But I'll tell you who's not wanted anymore. This is pretty stunning. Our running backs in the NFL.
Who are not what?
Who are not wanted. Your running backs. This is remarkable. Do you realize Todd Gurley, who just 2-3 years ago
About 3, I think it was.
was the toast of the NFL, had a 4-year, $57 million deal in 2018, 45 guaranteed. Le'Veon Bell, 4-year, $52 million, and after he sat out and did all his thing, and then Devonta.
And now he's just bouncing around the league now, isn't he?
Well, I'm going to get to that. So Devonta Freeman, 5-year, $41 million in 2017. All 3 of those running backs were out of the league as of yesterday. Looks like Le'Veon Bell is working out with the Baltimore Ravens, who have been decimated with some injuries in their backfield.
When he's taking a serious haircut.
Oh my gosh, yes! But it's stunning what a passing league this has become.
Yeah.
The rules
Goes back to what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
About everybody moving in the same direction, and if you throw a ball up in the air, the chances are pretty good, depending on the pass coverages and the actual pass routes, that you don't have people where they can line. And plus, they've got all these rules now. Can't hit a defenseless receiver, which is all good stuff. I mean, I ain't saying anything about that. That they should change the rules back to the caveman days. But at the same time, it tells you exactly all you need to know, that basically the business model, which was originally what the football was all about, which is lining up and running at each other at full speed and making contact and trying to knock one man out of the way.
Mano.
The mano part is completely being phased out of it. And I don't know, like I said, it's not the same game, but at the same time, it's never been more popular. So, they're on to something.
Yeah.
They're creating an entertainment vehicle here that people are really hopping onto.
The likes we've never seen. Now, here's something else that is going to be.
By the way, do you know off the top of your head what the average salary is for a running back? They would probably be who's down with them? A strong
Punters,
safety,
punters.
They're down.
They are only.
Are kickers make more money? I would guess yes.
I think as a whole, running backs are still slightly ahead of kickers, but they've fallen that far.
Yeah, they're basically at the very bottom of the food chain.
Yeah, there's no question. The other thing that's going to be interesting this year, and especially after last year's COVID season when we were in full bloom and stadiums were abandoned and otherwise here, that you still have a lot of players that are unvaccinated. And what the NFL has come down hard and fast, if the team can't make it and they have to forfeit and players don't get paid, take the Minnesota Vikings as an example. They still only have an 81% vaccination rate, and the NFL average is 93%. I don't have the Washington football team.
So they're 6% back? You say 87 versus 93?
81 versus
81.
93. Now,
12%.
But the list includes, there's some of the top players on their team. Kirk Cousins.
He's not vaccinated.
Running back Dalvin Cook, their wideout Adam Thielen, safety Harrison Smith, defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson. These are their studs.
Why? I can't understand. Why would they be opposed to being vaccinated? I haven't paid enough attention to it, but what is the common theme with all the people that's unvaccinated? What is their reluctance?
The universal, what I've seen out of plenty of the guys that have talked about this in the NFL, even from Montez Sweat here locally, is, listen, I'm a young athlete in the best physical shape of my life. I don't need to put this into my system. And I think there's a hesitancy for how fast this was rolled out. And let's face it, I got to imagine probably back in those days that you go back and say, I'm bulletproof, man. Come on, that's for everybody else.
Well, that was
we're cut from a different cloth here.
When we started this today, that's what I was talking about a year ago, 18 months ago, going, how bad can it be? And I think that is their theory. But this is where I think the I don't know. I guess would it be where if you knew that instead of being what is it 0.001% lethal or something,
Right.
it's really
Right.
way down there.
And especially
if it was like 50% lethal, if it was, and all of a sudden people be going, well, maybe I might just get that vaccine. But the problem is, we live in a social world, right? And you're kind of like, well, I don't really care about you. I mean, I can go ahead and get it because I'm healthy and I'll get through it. And, that my problem isn't the fact I give it to you. That's your problem, ain't my problem. It's kind of like, yeah, I don't know.
And so check this out. And you talk about a competitive standpoint and how this can factor into betting lines and your fantasy sports or money. So here's your first COVID-19 list player for the Dallas Cowboys. Their all-pro guard Zach Martin is out against their biggest game tomorrow night against Tampa Bay and that vaunted defense or whatever. Yeah. So he is the first one on the COVID-19 list to be ruled out of a game after testing positive for COVID, and he was fully vaccinated.
That's where it gets kind of weird to me. And when I say weird is that there's, everybody's trying to come up with the better mousetrap theory and or approach to how to do all this stuff. And in the end, the NFL and all the rules that they've made up regarding, like you just talked about, where teams may have to forfeit games and all this stuff. I mean, if you're a fan, once again, it's not like the Olympics where, you keep running until you end up with 10 people or 8 people, what it is, in 100 meters because we've narrowed it down. These are the fastest people.
Best of the best.
The best of the best, and now we're going to let them run and find out who wins this. This isn't what we're dealing with here. So once again, you're looking at something that has got show business written all over it because there's so many nuances as to how you get to the final, But then again, the NFL does a great job of, don't pay any attention. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't pay attention to that guy behind the curtain over there. He means nothing.
You can't imagine a scenario. I cannot imagine a scenario. And you've been around, can you imagine you got to AFC Championship game and Patrick Mahomes tested positive? You don't think he's not playing? If he's not symptomatic, you don't think that they wouldn't
just look the other way
and that this doesn't happen.
What about the Buffalo Bills?
Of course.
I bring up the Buffalo Bills only because they have some people on their roster that are unvaccinated, right?
No question.
One of the receivers,
very Cole Beasley.
Exactly, very outspoken, critic of having to get the vaccination. But here's a team that has been to the Super Bowl 4 years straight in a row, lost every one of them, and now who knows? Maybe what I've been reading about. Maybe it's their turn to do something really spectacular, and that team gets down the line all the way, and the next thing you know, you got players that are, the night before the game or the week before the game, and next thing you know that you can't play.
John, they're the third favorite to win the Super Bowl based on Vegas.
Well, that's why I brought them up in a way, because I thought that they were
at 1,101. They're third favorite.
Well, I don't know. That's not my problem because I'm not into it that deep.
How about some sweet action? All right. So who do you think are? I'm going to the top. Let's do the top 6. Based on Vegas and who they like with the
top 6 to get to the
total
Super Bowl?
wins, total wins. Who's in rank of who's going to have the most wins and what you can bet on over and under? Give me your top. What do you think would be the top 6?
All right, you got to have Kansas City.
Number 1 at 12.5 wins.
I got to have Tampa.
Number 2 at 12 wins.
Then I got to believe that you're going to throw in the Buffalo Bills.
Tied with number 3 at 11 wins.
Then after that, it all falls apart. Obviously.
Baltimore Ravens.
Really? I was going to say, there is nobody from the NFC East on that list.
Oh, no.
No, I don't think so.
You go Rams at 10.5, 49ers at 10.5.
Chargers, are they in that at all?
Browns at 10.5.
Jeez.
Packers at 10, Seahawks at 10. New England Patriots, 9.5. This is going to be a really fascinating year to see what happens with them, especially with the departure of Cam and Belichick and what's going on. The Chargers are 9.5.
All right.
Your first NFC East team is the Dallas Cowboys at 9. Your Washington football team at 8.5. New York Giants at 7, and the Philadelphia Eagles at 6.5 with their first-year head coach. And
who's their head coach? Do you know?
I believe he was the offensive coordinator from Indianapolis, Sirianni.
Can't keep up.
Yeah, a lot of new faces. But the overwhelming favorites for the Super Bowl are no surprises. Actually, it's Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Buffalo, and the Rams and the Ravens, Packers, all in the 49ers, all at the same odds. Now, when we last left the Washington football team, John, if you recall, they backed into the NFC East champion. It's 7-9.
Yep.
Or was it?
Yeah.
It was 7-9.
Right.
And they play 17 games this year.
Right.
And you realize
so they could be 7-10.
2004, no team has gone back-to-back in winning the NFC East since 2004 in this division.
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
17 years.
Yeah, I was looking way back when. This is like a month ago when we were doing the show, and I looked at their roster, or I should say I looked at their schedule real quick. I haven't looked at it recently. But I kind of went through, and I thought I was being pretty generous, really, and I came up with about a 500 season. But then I forgot, I was going 8-8, and I realized, well, it could either be 8-9, or it could be 9-8. But that's where I see this football team. Basically, I don't know. I just don't see it yet. But then again, I've what little bit I've read about them, that some people, they got sneaky. They're sneaky good at on offense. They got some sneaky good players. All of them. Well, okay, we'll see if they're sneaky good. I don't know.
I think it comes down to...
You don't win much in the NFL being sneaky, though. I know that.
No. And, the defense is... I tell you something. Defense, in my mind, has a lot of pressure on them. Because,
they got a tremendous
because they got all the press clippings. They got everything. But we saw with our own eyes last year, they couldn't stop people in the first half. They fell behind. Remember, this team was 7-9, okay? You weren't even 9-7. You weren't 10. So you weren't world beaters anywhere. And I think the defense is under a lot of pressure to perform to the preseason billing that they've been getting since last year, because certain stats rang up and like, oh, man, look at all that. But at the end of the day, the wins and momentum in games and how many times they fell behind to bad teams and couldn't, or in the second half couldn't stop teams when they absolutely had to shut them down and lock them down. Couldn't do it. And to me, it's Fitzmagic. It's Ryan Fitzpatrick. And can this be the first time in his career on his 9th team that he doesn't perform like he does, which is 50% great, unbelievable, and 50% like, oh my God, has this guy ever played the game?
Yeah,
that's the role of the
He has
dice.
that. He's probably one of the more unique quarterbacks. I'm sure I can't think of anybody that comes to mind that I would compare him with over the years. But as far as a guy that can be streaky hot and like you say, fits magic. And then a guy that can be streaky, cold, and
Jeff George was like that. That's somebody that comes to mind.
Might be a pretty good,
he was the gunslinger.
Did he have a beard? I think he did.
Yes, he sure did.
But not as good as Fitzmagic. You got to give Fitz credit.
And Fitz,
that beard is
I
impressive.
love the personality too. It seems like a grounded dude that gets it and understands.
How could he not be?
You're
on your 9th team.
I am a performer. That's super smart. He went to Harvard now.
Well, exactly. Well, I was going to say he's a consummate entertainer. He gets it. I mean, when you've been on 9 teams. I mean, that tells me a little something.
So fans,
he's like Paladin. Have gun will travel.
And you're going to be entertained. Now you're going to be disappointed too at times.
You never know. He's got. We'll see. Obviously, he's got a great receiver in McLaren to throw the ball to, and maybe the tight end that's coming around a little bit.
Yep.
Logan Thomas. Is that right? That's his name?
Yes, sir.
So they got a couple players. The running back position, as we know now, it really doesn't mean anything one way or the other because that's a fungible position.
Antonio Gibson's going to light it up. All right. So what do you think the line is? Sunday, 1 o'clock, the L.A. Chargers. The L.A. Chargers.
I like the Chargers in this game.
What do you think the line is?
I'm going to go with the Chargers, and they're probably like a +2 or a -2.
Okay, that's pretty doggone good for Riggo and coming off the COVID. You're on the physically able to perform list.
I
now.
finally made it. Yeah.
So the line.
I'm negative.
The line did open at -2,
and it was San Diego.
Now
and the game is in.
It's here.
It's here.
It's here.
And San Diego's favored by 2, or Washington?
San Diego was favored by 2. Now it's down to 1, and. These opening lines for a lot of this, it's really tough to pick because everybody's going off of last year and nobody knows, right? You haven't learned a damn thing from preseason. And preseason has proven to be even more meaningless than ever before.
I think more confusing. I think that, these teams that, I don't know. That's what I get back to originally where we started with this, that when you talk about guys that played the game so many years ago, such as myself, I don't know. We've really got a good handle on how this all fits together when it comes to the modern game of football and how they prepare to play on Sunday and what they actually do. Basically, and I think there must be, it's a good thing, they walk through everything. There's no practice, there's no hitting, no nothing, and that is reflected on the field as well. Once again, it's not, they're creating the illusion.
Right.
The game is basically the same. You got 11 players on both sides, and the offense tries to move the ball. That part, but the nuances involved in there and how people get into position and where they get on a certain play and putting themselves is not even close to what it used to be. And that's what makes it, that's where you know that really it's not a matter of being a big tough guy, and having super skills really. I think it really gets down to where you have a coach that has a system that he has designed for his particular talent that he has, and the ability to teach that and get these guys to be in the positions that they need to be in at the proper time is really where the more success happens. And, I got to give this guy a lot of credit because he was one of those coaches 50 years ago, George Allen. And that's the way, I don't know because I never played defense, but because they were what the team was all about was defense, special teams, offense, really there was no emphasis whatsoever on offense. Yeah, just don't go out and screw things up. Is that he had, and that's why he wanted all older players, because he knew that they had been around the game long enough that this is what the old do your job. And if you do your job and everybody does what they're supposed to do and you're very well versed and you're well educated on what you're up against and the opponent, that you will have success. And he was one of the first guys that figured that out. I gave him credit. I'm sure there was other people, but he comes to mind just because I happened to play for the guy and was like, this is ridiculous. If you're an offensive player, why would you? I realized early on I had made a huge mistake coming to Washington thinking I was going to get to run the football. And that isn't the way it worked out.
Well, John, if you even look at the collective bargaining agreement, the players, they don't hit anymore. Everything's basically a glorified walkthrough, and because the players' contracts are so large, and your star players, these are commodities. They don't want them performing in practice, getting dinged up over here. Save it for when we're live on stage, guys, and that's what it's morphed into. All back to your entertainment.
Yeah, well, that's clearly where it went. And I can't say, I look back on it now. As a player, I wished it would have been that way when I was playing, clearly. But then I got to say, from the flip side of it, I go, well, there's hidden aspects of allowing that changes the way people feel about their team. And that's what gets interesting is for a fan nowadays, how do they really tie into a team when they know the next year that they'll have a bunch of guys, perhaps even from their most ardent rivals, that will be on the roster, and now I got to cheer for this guy. It just is a completely different animal anymore. But at the same time, it's very popular, and we'll see what happens. Riggo, out.